All right, let's get started with some retirement news. We had two major retirements, both in the NFL and the NBA this week. We start with Julian Edelman. He announced his retirement at 34 years of age. He had knee issues for the last couple of years. It was pretty bad towards the end of this season. So he ended up failing a physical this week and then ended up deciding to hang up his cleats. Is Julian Edelman a Hall of Famer? Yes or no? Brannan, you start first.
Okay, so I think first there's a caveat here, right? So I got this from listening to sports radio and local radio, and they actually had a really good point. Julian Edelman in the regular season is not a Hall of Famer. Julian Edelman in the postseason is 1,000% a Hall of Famer. I would argue that at least 4 or 5 that Tom Brady does not have at least 4 or 5 of his rings.
Julian has 3
without
so it'd
Julian
be the 3.
Edelman.
It would be the 3 rings.
Like right, those 3 and like those 3 rings he doesn't get without Julian Edelman. Because he's well, but here's the thing. Julian Edelman is one of the most clutch wide receivers in the playoffs of all time. It's literally Jerry Rice then him in terms of most touchdowns in the postseason.
And catches,
now,
I think.
Now am I going to compare him to Jerry Rice? Hell no, because Jerry Rice has so many. He was a great wide receiver in both regular season and postseason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he'll make it in. I think he's one of those guys that like was always a household name for me as a wide receiver for a while, especially during the heyday of the Patriots. I mean, it was – so I don't know. I would personally say yes because I think being good in the playoffs is a better skill than being good in the regular season.
I think that's true. I think you make a valid point with the postseason piece. Shane, your thoughts on is Julian Edelman a Hall of Famer?
I think most people are saying that he shouldn't be. And I personally, I think he absolutely should be. At first I was in the camp that no, he shouldn't be, but then I really thought about it and I looked at everything. And I mean, Brannan said he was very clutch in the playoffs, which is big, obviously. But something else that I think is worth noting with him is that he was that kind of player who was willing to do anything.
7th round pick out of Kent State. Look at him as a quarterback going all the way from a punt returner to a kick returner to a wide receiver and a Super Bowl champion.
Right. And I mean, he in his early years, he even played defense a little bit, and he was really pretty good at everything. And just having, the fact that he was a pure athlete combined with the way that he did perform and just his mental determination to be a great player. I mean, I think he absolutely deserves to be in the Hall. I mean, it's some of the, he was the Super Bowl MVP, and in the Super Bowl before that, he had one of the greatest Super Bowl catches ever. I mean, to be fair, it was probably a little luck, but still.
That's one of my favorite catches of all time.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing. Every time I think of those 3 Super Bowls that the Patriots won with him, I don't think of Brady or Gronk or whatever. I think of Edelman. That's the thing for me. You know what I mean? I think about what he did because he was the one that I saw in those games and thought, wow, that guy's cool, or whatever. Or like, yeah, that guy's great. So, and just everything he overcame, and then still getting and being a great player. I mean, I think he should be, but That's my own thought.
My thought process is a little bit different with this because it really matters who's the pool of guys that he's competing with 6 years down the road and beyond. Because as Brandon and I talked about, and I know you talked about this as well, Shane, when we talked about the Hall of Fame last year, or I think 2 years ago, we looked at the class and we're like, oh my God, this class is crazy. So many guys are just not going to go in. I look at Julian Edelman and think that the regular season is probably what's going to stop him from going in, not because he doesn't deserve to go in, but because the classes are going to continue to get better and better and better. The pool is going to continue to get better and better. And I think it's going to be harder and harder for him to get in then at the end of the day, because I don't see the media going, yeah, the postseason's enough over a free safety or another wide receiver or quarterback that could be in that class in 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, even during the regular season, he still led his team in receptions and receiving yards and all this, and he'd get, sometimes 100 catches in a year. But yeah, it's when you compare him to other people in the regular season, it's not, he's definitely not the first guy that comes to mind. Let's put it that way.
And
right?
And don't get me wrong. In 6 years, the class could fade. It could probably not be that good, but I don't see that happening. I really don't, but I don't know who would be options 6 years down the road. Who knows who else retires in the next however many years or who stays left in past years. But that's my main thing. And this is not, we're going to get to LaMarcus Aldridge in a bit in his retirement. He's going to get in the Hall of Fame. He's going to get in the Basketball Hall of Fame easy because that's the Basketball Hall of Fame. It's easy to get in. Everyone gets in. I think LaMarcus deserves to get in, but he's going to get in because that Basketball Hall of Fame is the Basketball Hall of Fame. It's easy. Football is a different animal. It's harder to get in, and it's going to get harder now more than ever.
Yeah. I mean, I do think one thing about receivers is that so many of the great receivers right now are really young, which that does benefit him, I think. But yeah, I mean, regardless of whether he gets in or not, I mean, the guy still had an incredible career. I don't think that'll be like the crown to achievement for him.
No, I don't think that's
Nor
the case.
should it be.
I don't think it is for many players in the Hall of Fame. Is the Hall of Fame, but we all look at what they did in their careers that matters. Brandon, do you kind of see my point though that the Hall of Fame is just getting better and the talent's just getting better?
I mean, yeah, but I don't know. There's a part of me that feels like he won't be. I don't think he'll get in his first try, but I think he'll get in like eventually. Because I'm looking at some of these possibility class lists, and like you've got guys like Andre Johnson and Steve Smith Sr. And I'm like, I personally feel like I would put
you probably put him above.
I would
him,
put someone
sure.
I would put someone who performed well in the playoffs and had a fairly good career.
Over those guys.
And I think a lot of what people take a little bit too much is like Pro Bowl, like because a lot of these, when they're talking about they're talking about what they did in their career, it's like, 8-time Pro Bowler, 6-time Pro Bowler, 16-time Pro.
All Pro matters so much more. All Pro matters so much more.
Right. Yeah. But when you're reading these things, it's like, okay, Pro Bowl, nobody gives a shit if they went to the Pro Bowl. What I care about is, did you make the playoffs? Did you win in the playoffs? Did you have a good career in the playoffs? Because I don't know, maybe I'm different, but playoffs is where you either put up or shut up as a player.
Let's put this into perspective on what matters for Hall of Fame eligibility. What matters for Hall of Fame eligibility is regular season statistics, postseason statistics, Super Bowls, all the other awards, MVP, even the Walter Payton Man of the Year, because that is one of the most prestigious awards in the league. All that counts. And then it's, well, yeah, those are pretty much, and then all pros. Pro Bowl is at the bottom of that list. I don't even think it qualifies even anymore because guys can get in, regardless of last year with COVID and everything. In most years, guys drop out and guys like Mitchell Trubisky or Teddy Bridgewater gets in and that gets put on their resume, even though they weren't even that good that year. So I think for guys like Andre Johnson, though, that was when the Pro Bowl was kind of ending to be valuable. It was in the early 2000s. So I think it still matters at some level from like when the Pro Bowl started to like 2010 or 11.
Yeah.
That's where I think it does matter to some extent,
yeah,
but it just isn't anymore. But I think when you're looking at that perspective,
I do see what you mean by like the people being in the Pro Bowl, like the list of players who would still be around to even possibly get into the Hall of Fame just gets deeper and deeper. I mean, like all these players who have been great. I mean, if everybody gets into the Hall of Fame who's eligible, and then there's still people left over in 2027 would be like Sean Alexander, Eric Berry, Navarro Bowman, Jari Evans, James Harrison. Like,
it'd be hard for me to not put Edelman over a few.
Hines Ward.
Reggie Wayne. Get in really early.
He's probably going to get in. It's going to be interesting because I think we're going to see a lot of defensive players get in over wide receivers. And that would be an interesting conversation to have, is looking at who's eligible when and being like, okay, who do we think should get into the Hall of Fame out of who's eligible?
Right, and who's
and the conversation? I
think
a good conversation to have for me would be, I would love to talk about Cam Chancellor is coming up for eligibility for the Hall of Fame in 2023.
Who else would be in that class is always my question. And who it would be, right? We got to wait till that year. And that's kind of where my head's at.
But like in my mind, I personally believe Cam Chancellor is a certifiable first-round Hall of Famer.
Most of the Legion of Boom should get in, and then this is the same argument with Julian. It's like the same thing. It's like, but again, who else will be there at that time? But Shane, what are your thoughts on this piece?
I don't think it's a similar argument there, though.
It's not entirely similar.
I think Cam Chancellor, as an all-around package, he is not a conversation. He will get in the, like, what is it, 8-year time period they have or something?
I believe it's 8 years. Yeah.
He'll get in eventually.
He'll get in on that. If not,
his resume speaks for itself.
If nothing else, he'll probably get in the first 3 tries. But would you give that same benefit of the doubt to Edelman is kind of the question.
No, if Edelman, for me, I think Edelman should get in. I think it'll take him probably towards the end of his time for getting in. I think he's going to be, you know what it's going to be similar to? It's going to be a similar conversation, I believe, to what people had with in the MLB when they were talking about
no one got into the Baseball Hall of Fame last year.
No, I'm thinking about the Mariners Edgar.
Yeah.
When people were talking about Edgar because of the fact that he was a DH.
Yeah.
Which to me the whole time it should not have been a conversation. I mean, he invented the damn position. Like,
let me really quickly preface this about all these Hall of Fames. Basketball Hall of Fame is probably the easiest.
Oh yeah.
Everyone gets in. And then let's see. I don't know much about the Hockey Hall of Fame. Is that fairly easy, Brandon?
Hockey Hall of Fame is harder than basketball, but it's still pretty,
NFL or pro football's hard.
And MLB is the hardest.
And MLB is impossible and shouldn't even exist. Thank you.
Yeah, MLB just has a stupid bar for getting in.
Yeah, because of Babe Ruth not having perfect vote. Yet we voted Steph Curry to be perfect in the NBA. Anyway, or not perfect for the MVP, but we're probably going to vote him to maybe be perfect in the Hall of Fame. There's probably a lot of perfect guys that get in the Hall of Fame in basketball. Who knows? But the comparison's bizarre between the MVP and the Hall of Fame. But either way, Shane, your overall thoughts on how the different leagues approach the Hall of Fame process and how different all of it is?
I think it's definitely part of it has to do with the fact that there are so many less basketball players because it's only a team of 12, 15 guys as opposed to 50 on a football team.
53.
Right. So I think that's definitely part of it. It is. I do think it is. It is strange how teams determine, or not how leagues determine who or like what qualifies a Hall of Famer, because it's easy to see that it seems to be kind of different from league to league.
It's incredibly subjective.
Right. I wish there was more of a, I don't know how you do this, but I wish there was more of a objective way of looking at it, because like, for instance, you talk about playoff success, Super Bowls, whatever for NFL. So then what about a guy like Calvin Johnson, where he didn't really ever even go to the playoffs. So that right there gets rid of half of his credentials for the Hall. You know what I mean?
But then you make a weird argument to say, or not a weird argument, but then your counter argument would always be he was on the flippin' Detroit Lions.
Right.
And he was the most dominant receiver either way of our generation. Like that was our generation, was Calvin Johnson.
Yeah.
But you are correct in that you are eliminating the playoff success. You're making a caveat, unfair or fair, whatever you want to say, that probably doesn't need to be there.
I think the moral of the story, at least in my opinion, is that it's becoming more and more, at least it seems to me, that the Hall in really any sport just doesn't, not that it doesn't matter, but people don't care about it as much anymore. It still is probably important to players, but to fans and to the fans' overall thoughts and legacy of a player. Even if Edelman doesn't get in, we know what he did. You know what I mean? We don't need the Hall to tell us that he was a great player.
And I think that's the thing, that the Hall of Fame is all about remembrance, right? The Hall of Fame is all about, oh, here's this guy and here's what he did, right? Taking your little kid to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But honestly, these days now, even if Edelman doesn't get in, we're going to be like, oh, Edelman made this catch in the Super Bowl. He's the MVP with Brady. He's part of that Patriots dynasty, a significant part. We don't need the Hall of Fame to remember that piece. We just know that. And let's be honest, either way, for Edelman, in terms of legacy, he's going to be in the Patriots Ring of Honor. So there's that too.
Yeah.
Brandon, do you have anything else to add before we conclude this piece of the conversation?
Don't think so.
Yeah. I think we pretty much covered that piece. And then let's move on to LaMarcus Aldridge. He unfortunately retired unexpectedly due to an irregular heartbeat. I believe that he had on April 10th during a game. It significantly got worse. And then he announced, I believe the other day, or what was it? Yesterday, I believe. Yeah. That he announced his retirement from the game of basketball, taking care of his health and family. So props to him for that. And props to him for a great career. Man, LaMarcus Aldridge, I think, will always be underrated, just because his play style wasn't the most flashiest thing in the world. I mean, it made sense. He went to the Spurs, right? But he was amazing in Portland in that part of his career, and then in Brooklyn there wasn't much. But I always remember him as a Blazer first. That's just how I always think of him. I think of young Aldridge and the way he played with Portland, especially with Lillard, as Lillard was continuing to grow up a bit. I won't remember the Spurs years as much. They didn't seem as valuable, but definitely the Blazers years. Brandon, do you have any thoughts on LaMarcus?
I mean, he was a good player, but he like I think he's always kind of been overshadowed by other players that he's played with.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he was with the when he started out with the Trailblazers, he was not the big star, and then he went to the Spurs and he wasn't the big star.
Yeah.
And then he was going to the Nets and he wasn't going to be the big star.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm sure, like as you said, I'm sure he'll get in the Hall of Fame because I think if you're somebody who's played a long time and you've put up decent numbers and
you've been a star, it's really, have you been a star in the league, a significant enough star in the league,
right?
To make that's like, not even a conversation.
It's like, have you made an impact consistently?
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, apparently this is something
All-Star games, I would imagine.
Apparently this is something that he has been dealing with his whole career. He went to the hospital at the end of his rookie season in Portland with shortness of breath. He hasn't really said anything about what popped up to cause him to decide to call it short, but I guess 15 years isn't really that short. But
yeah, no, it's not. So this is what's going to be on his Hall of Fame resume: 7-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, and an All-Rookie team. That's what's going to highlight his resume.
But no ring.
Yep. But that, again, Basketball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he shouldn't have a problem, I don't think. I mean, he was because he played mostly power forward, but he was also center too. I mean, yeah.
I look at him more as a power forward more than anything else. Not that it matters in today's NBA, but
because he was always a very, like you said, he was never the flashy guy, but he was always the good supporter, team player. I mean, he'd get a fair amount of, he averaged, I think, 20 points a game his whole career, which is good. He just, he showed up, helped out his team. And, I mean, while he didn't have any rings, he certainly, he did have success, I would say. I mean, highlighted by the all-pro teams and whatnot. So,
yeah. What's interesting about LaMarcus's career, I think, is that transition from Portland to San Antonio. Portland and San Antonio both fit him in his career. But I remember when he signed with San Antonio, and that was one of the big signings of that free agent class, probably the biggest, he went to San Antonio to win a title. At the tail end of Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and then Kawhi coming up, he went there to win a title. And unfortunately, that didn't happen, and he probably could have won a title this year. Who knows? But he went to San Antonio to win a title, but he just wasn't able to get there because San Antonio was just getting older. He went there at a time.
Was on the rise.
Right, Golden State was on the rise, Cleveland. So that was kind of the main thing there. But either way, I still think a pretty awesome career, especially if you're a Blazers fan or a Spurs fan. You'll remember him even more fondly than most of us. So, still a great career.